Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how I render a Halloween scene in Twinmotion with Path Tracer. So first of all, I'm going to create an image. I click on media and then on the plus icon. I adapt my perspective the way I like, and then I just refresh my image. Then I click on my camera settings and I like to adapt my focal length. I refresh my image again and I'll leave it like that. I also like to enable parallelism. You can always adapt your perspective and just refresh the image. Alright, so I enable now Path Tracer up here just to see how it looks at the moment. I do have some candles in my scene, and what I like to do usually, I like to click on my pipette tool, click on the candle and scroll down to emissive. And then I like to increase this a bit, just to give it a nice glow. I also click on the flame of the candle and I also like to increase the flame a bit. I enable Path Tracer and you see that it has a bit of a glow. You can always adapt those settings. I also have some text in my scene, so I click also again with the pipette tool on the text and scroll down to emissive and also increase the emissive intensity a bit. You can also change color if you like. You can also change the tint, the scale, whatever you like. So my scene overall is way too bright. I want it to be a bit more spooky, so I go to my camera settings and I go down with the exposure. All right. So I have some pumpkins in my scene, and what I like, I usually go to lights and I use an omnidirectional light inside my pumpkin and I increase the intensity and maybe also the color, and I enable the shadows. So now I go to my environment settings and I adapt them as well. I scroll down to HDRI environment and I enable an HDRI in the background. You don't have to do that. I personally like the way it looks that way, but that's totally up to you. I scroll down to sun intensity and I set this to 10 or maybe 20 depending on the overall light settings in your scene, because I want some sunlight in the back. And then I just adapt the rotation. I'm going to decrease hate fog because for this scene I don't need that. And I also like to increase ambient, maybe to 4. Then I go to my camera settings again and I like to increase the highlight reduction and I like to decrease the shadow boost. I like to click on depth of field and I enable this. I click pick focus and I want the focus to be on my text and my main pumpkin. I also like to increase aperture a bit so that it's not too washed out in the back. And because I have some candles in my scene, I click on bloom and flares and I increase the bloom intensity, and you can see what it does here, especially for this candle. If I increase it, I feel like my scene is nearly done. I go to my color grading and I just increase the contrast a bit and I go down with the saturation. If I wouldn't use a depth of field in the scene, I sometimes like to use a line light filter. You can find the line light filter here. But because I use depth of field and Path Tracer, you would see some lines in the back and I don't like that. So I click on the render settings now and I increase the samples and the bounces. and I'll leave my fireflies like that. Before I start rendering, I'm clicking on my camera settings again, and I go down to lens and details, and I like to decrease vignetting and I like to increase the sharpness just a bit. For this specific scene, I like to increase chromatic aberration, but just a bit. Alright, now I go to my image settings and you can adapt your output size. In this case, I think I want to render it with 4K, but this also depends on your computer specifications. Always be aware of that. So I click now on my export settings. Before you start your render process, please make sure that you saved your file. I click on image on the plus icon, I select my image. And then you can also go to details and you can adapt your refinement here. And then just click on export and save your file and start exporting. Okay, so if I want to render the same scene with Lumen, first of all, I'm going to change it to real time, change it to Lumen. I'm going to increase my scene detail. I'm also going to scroll down and increase the quality and also the bounce count. I like to play around a bit with the shadow, just a bit, and I usually go down with the exposure a bit more. I also like to go to the environment settings and increase ambient. So go to color grading and go to filter and scroll down to line light. And I'm also going to change my format to 2K because of my computer specifications. And sometimes I also go to my camera settings again and I also decrease the shadow boost a bit. And then I go back to export and export my image. So if I would now render the same scene with my standard real time, I would go back to my render settings, click on real time and leave it on standard. Then I would increase my GI intensity and I would also increase my GI distance. I would go to my environment settings and I would increase my ambient. I would go to my HDRI, backdrop HDRI, and I think I increase my intensity just a bit. You can always adapt those settings. You can also play around with the sun intensity, maybe. I think I'll leave it like that. I go back to my camera settings and click on local exposure and I reduce the highlight reduction. And I'm decreasing my shadow boost. If I go on Lumen, you see that I need to fake some lighting in my scene. So I click on my standard, I go to my lights and for the text, I use some omnidirectional light, drag and drop it into my scene, and then I just change the color, temperature and also the intensity. I drag and drop a second one into my scene and I place it behind my text. And I enable the shadows. Change the color temperature again. Adapt a few settings and I decrease the intensity. And I just place it behind my text and maybe also the book so that I do have some shadows in my scene. Maybe something like this, and I decrease the intensity just a bit so it's not too harsh. And I'm also going to decrease my bloom and flares. I'm also using a line light filter and I'm making a test render just to see how it looks, and then I can decide if I need to change more settings. Okay, so if I take a look now on my test render, you see that I definitely need to reduce my highlight reduction, and I also need to use a reflection probe in my scene. And furthermore, I also need to adapt a few light settings, and yeah, I'm just going to play around with the settings a bit more, and then I'm going to show you my final render. Thank you so much for watching my video and taking the time to watch my video. I do appreciate it a lot. And yeah, I hope you do have an amazing day. I wish you all the best, and I hope I see you in my next video. Bye!